Welcome to the On Assignment podcast. I'm John Harvey. My co-host Will Derlick is on assignment today, but I am joined though with my lovely wife Brenda Harvey. Brenda, how you doing, sweetie?
I'm so great. I'm great to be back in the studio here, and it's a privilege to talk about some things that are near and dear to me, and to join with you this afternoon. So
Yeah. You are back by popular demand, to be honest. Our first episode, which if you haven't listened to our episode number 12 together, it might be a good idea for you to go back, listen to that, and then catch us on this conversation, because really what we're doing is we're taking some of what we talked about in episode 12 and we're going a little bit deeper.
that's good.
I've had some guys reach out and be like, there's some questions they had, and so we're going to address those today. And the big thing we're going to talk about today, though, is how do we connect as a couple in marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Connection in marriage is absolutely vital to the health and the life and the duration of a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
If a man and his wife are not connected, then they basically begin to live together, but they're just physically living together, but they're not doing life together.
That's
and
right.
There's a big difference. It's interesting. We read a stat as we were preparing for this that said that they did a big poll, and they were talking to people about loneliness, and that in that poll, 63% of the people who said that they were lonely, 63% of those people were married and living with their spouse.
Mm-hmm.
They were in a marriage relationship, but yet they felt lonely, which is really marriage. That's the opposite of what marriage is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at a lot of the marriages that we've seen through the years that have struggled and then ended, connection was the big piece that was missing for them, or that they had lost track of.
Mm-hmm.
And in that place of disconnection, their marriage
Mm-hmm.
ended. And so as a listener today, you might be a guy who's married, you might be a guy who's divorced, you might be a single guy who's looking forward to getting married someday, but I feel like you're going to gain some real valuable input into your life about connection and marriage. And so listen in. It's going to be a great episode. If you're on Spotify or Apple, why don't you subscribe to our On Assignment podcast? Give us a like on YouTube. All of those little things that kind of drive you crazy when you hear someone talk about, those things all help the algorithms out and help drive people to our podcast. And with the state of the family and the state of marriages right now in the United States, man, we want as many people as possible to be able to get a hold of what we're talking about today. It's so vital. And so with that being said, the ability to connect as a man in a marriage can be oftentimes more difficult for him than it is for his wife, at a natural level.
Right.
Men connect well when we feel comfortable with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I can connect well with the guys at work when I'm working with them, because we're working together. We're on a team. We're actually engaged in a common goal, and we're working together. And that's where connection happens pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that connection doesn't usually go very deep, but there is a connection. It's the same like with sports as well, right? Guys will connect well with their teammates when they're playing a sport. I loved playing basketball for years. And one of the things I loved about it was the camaraderie of being on a court with a bunch of guys, and you're competitive and you're giving it 100%, and you're connecting with the guys there. But rarely, again, did those connections go very deep. I've got hunting buddies that I connect with when we go hunting together. And those guys you get to know better, because through the years you go through really difficult challenges while you're out there in the wilderness, and you have to deal with different issues. And so you go a little deeper. I feel like I've gone a little deeper with my hunting buddies than I ever did with my basketball buddies. But really, though, connection for me has been a challenge when it comes to anything deeper than what I did with work and sports and hunting. And so when it comes to marriage and connections vital, that's might be why we see so many marriages struggling is because a guy has a hard time figuring out how to connect with his wife.
Right.
And with that being said, why is connection so important in marriage? And what is it that a man should know about his wife that will help him understand how to connect with her?
I'm reminded of, in Genesis, Adam and Eve, we were made for connection. And women are emotional beings, and that is something that we want to feel, that connection. We want to actually be pursued by man, and to
Hmm.
be like, you're the beautiful one. You're the
Hmm.
one that I have eyes for. You're the one that I'm committed to.
Yeah.
We are longing and yearning for that connection.
Yeah. That's kind of like what John Eldridge writes about. And John Eldridge is an author. He wrote a book called Wild at Heart. And it's really interesting what you're saying, because in that book, he kind of highlights the fact that really in the core of a woman's heart, that there's an identity there, that she is a beauty that wants to be rescued. Kind of
Yes.
like the princess in all of the old medieval tales of
Hmm.
dragons and knights and that type of thing, right? Is that
Hmm.
kind of what you're getting at? Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we want that connection, and when there's a disconnection, I kind of see it like, it just kind of, a visual came to me, is that, there's a train track that's laid for that train to go down,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what happens is that every marriage experiences this,
Mm-hmm.
where
Right.
there is a disconnect, and that track is like, pretty soon you're like, it's, an inch off, it's 2 inches off, and pretty soon the track is like the big divide, and the train can't successfully go down that track
Right.
any longer
Right.
because of the disconnect.
Right.
But a woman wants to feel that connection.
Yeah. It's so true. It's incredible to me. Looking back over 32 years of marriage, it's like it really is remarkable how easy it is to become disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
to what I would call being altogether separate,
Mm-hmm.
because you're together at home, you're together at the ball games with your kids, you're together at church, whatever it is you guys do, you're doing those things together, but yet you're really doing it s- separately, disconnected. And
Yeah,
there's seasons in marriage where
that's
it's
right.
like that.
Yep.
And you're talking about Genesis. It's like Genesis talks about how that the two shall become one.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a part of the marriage covenant, that commitment that you make when you say your vows at when you get married, that is like, the two shall become one. I
Mm-hmm.
am giving myself, my
Mm-hmm.
life for you, and you are giving your life for me.
Yes.
And the level of connection, to use the word that we used a lot in episode 12, that level of intimacy that we build in those
Mm-hmm.
6 areas we discussed, that is as a coming together to where we are literally joining our lives together and becoming
Mm-hmm.
one. It's like, I remember hearing a woman talk about after her husband had passed away, how she felt like the very fabric of her life, they had been meshed together like a
Mm-hmm.
fabric, and that it had just kind of been torn apart, and the
Right.
pain of that.
Yes.
And so, in this place of becoming connected, we're actually woven together
That's right.
in so many different areas of our lives. But I tell you, you have to fight for that,
Oh, yes. That's right.
because the natural tendency is for us to really become annoyed with each other, become disillusioned with each
Mm-hmm.
other,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the cause, which we'll talk about a little bit, whatever the cause is,
You're right.
there's just a natural tendency for us to actually disconnect. It's way easier to disconnect than it is to connect. Connection requires so much effort, whereas
That's right.
disconnection basically requires no effort.
Absolutely. And there's also the enemy that wants to
Yeah.
divide
Yeah.
a husband and a wife.
Yeah.
And so the enemy works overtime. So we
Yeah.
got that going for us. And like you said, there's different seasons of life. There's seasons where you're in the midst of kids,
Mm-hmm.
raising small ones, and you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And then, you've got the season where every kid is in a sport, and you and I would be like, divide and conquer. You go
Yeah.
take them to that game. I'll take this one to this game. And then you find yourself like, you know, who are you? Wait,
Right.
hello.
Yeah.
And then the season of, like, what the season we're in is one of like kids getting, married and grandbabies. And now we're like empty nesters. And so that makes it easy for us to connect.
Yeah.
Uh,
Easier, for sure.
easier, but and being you still fight for connection.
Yeah.
You still have to fight for it,
Right.
no matter what season you're in.
And I feel like that's what's so vital about this conversation is that we really want a marriage that's built to last. We want a
Yes.
marriage that's going to go the distance. And the element of connection, I feel like, is the secret ingredient to that.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to fight for connection, no matter what season you're in, is absolutely vital for a marriage that's going to go the long haul. And so to the listener who's like thinking right now that, well, my marriage is, I'm so disconnected with my wife right now that I don't know that we'll ever reconnect. There's hope for you. We want to talk about that. To the person who's young, you're a young married and you're just starting off in the journey. This encouragement would be for you to always fight for connection. It won't always just come easily. It won't come naturally. It's going to be something that you're going to have to work at and fight for. So that connection piece is vital. And so looking at that, what are some of the things that cause marriage, spouses to disconnect? What are some of those things that cause us to disconnect for you and me, even in our own journey, and for the people that we've seen? I feel like that there's so much just anticipation and expectation, and you create all of these ideas of how your marriage is going to go when you're engaged, and then you get married, and then all of a sudden you are, there's a lot of beautiful things, great things that you discover, but there's also a lot of things where you're like, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. Or you begin to start seeing the flaws that were conveniently hidden while you were dating and engaged that all of a sudden are coming up now that you're living together and you're doing life together. And so how does that work?
I think, you talk about, the differences, you're trying to blend the two become one. So the blending process in the beginning, and then working out those differences, accepting things. Just a funny story is that when we first married, I came from a large family. Every light was left on in the house, cupboards left open. And I, come in as a whirlwind and free spirit. And then you're very structured and orderly. Yeah. And so then you'd be like, every light in the house is on. Do you know how to turn lights off? Okay, wait a minute. We got to, and then you were like, this is the way she is. I'm just going to be like, you accepted the differences that we had. And you're like, I'm actually going to care for her and turn off those lights. Yeah. And so there was that could have been a big disconnection for us and a wedge.
That was like, you say that, and it was interesting how aware I became of that real quickly and how annoyed I became with it.
Right.
It's like, it was like a serious, like, why can't she just shut a cupboard drawer? Why can't she, shut the light off after herself? And it's like, not to the point where I'm like trying to be Mr. like control freak, but it's like literally like, oh my gosh. It was like how I've never experienced that before. My family, that never happened in my family.
You all are orderly.
It was really kind of an interesting dynamic. And I remember at first really being like annoyed that you couldn't make the change to actually accommodate the fact that bothered me. And I felt like, well, if I ask her, I'm like, hey, could you turn the lights off when you leave the room, or could you shut the cupboard doors? It's like, when I would say that and then it didn't happen, I felt like it was an attack against me. And I felt like, well, she's not willing to actually make any changes to how she does things in order to help, in order to make me feel better.
Right.
And so I took it personally.
Yep.
And then you begin to realize, though, that, oh, she's not doing it out of spite against me. You're not doing it on purpose.
No,
but that's just kind of how you operate. And so when I began to realize that it wasn't something that you were even doing, like that you weren't even aware that you were doing that, it was just kind of part of how you operated. I had to choose then to not fight that fight.
Right.
because inside I wanted to fight that fight and be like,
Yeah.
every time I'd be like, get annoyed, get frustrated.
Right.
And so my response had to be adjusted because I realized that I'm not going to mold you and shape you
Yes.
into the person that I think you ought to be.
That's right.
And even when it comes to like the way we're wired organizationally, I'm like an alphabetical file guy, and you're like a stack woman, right?
Yes, I am. I
Yeah,
admit.
it's like you
Mhm.
operate with stacks, I
Right.
operate with files. And
Yes.
early on, that was hard for me too. Like,
Mhm.
where's the mail from last week that should be in the mail
Older.
folder, and it's kind of stacked somewhere randomly. Is
Mhm.
whatever the picture was. That's
No, and I'd be like, I can find it. I've got it. And I'd go through the stack, and here it is.
yes,
And you're like, wow,
yeah,
I
yep,
guess she has a different system.
right. And so you begin to learn those things early on, and you have to really understand that if I allow disappointment, if I
Yeah.
allow
Yeah.
unmet expectations,
Yep.
if I allow me to look at those things in your life as flaws,
Mhm.
things that you're not changing because you're unwilling to change,
Mhm.
then that's going to actually become an automatic wedge
Yep.
in our relationship that will drive us apart.
Yes.
Something so small as to leaving a light on or leaving a cupboard
Mhm.
door open or not putting things where they go.
Mhm.
Those little details could drive a wedge of disconnection in our marriage from the very beginning if we allowed it to.
That's right. It's like it chips away at it, after some time, that thing,
Mm-hmm.
that disappointment, that frustration. We build it bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
Like accusation to
Yeah.
the other. And pretty soon we've built, like I talked about in our other episode we've built cases
Yeah.
against each other.
Yes.
And those cases automatically build the great divide
Yeah.
between us, between a couple.
Yeah. It's like the steady separation of the tracks, like you talked about before.
Yes.
It starts off real
Mhm.
minute, these little annoyances, these little frustrations and
Mhm.
disappointments.
I
You
think,
have to have a lot of grace for each other, because I
yeah,
say all that's from my context, my
right.
perspective, but you had your things that bothered you as well, right?
Yeah.
And you'd tell
Yep.
me about. And
That's
so
right.
it wasn't like it was just all one-sided. This is a
No.
two-sided street.
Right.
And so we've got to have grace for each other and
Yep.
understand that my job isn't to change who I married.
That's
My
right.
job is to figure out, okay, who they are, love them for who they are, have
Mhm.
grace for those things that may frustrate me and disappoint me and cause me to get irritated. But then to begin to understand that's not a battle that I want to fight, because it's going to destroy my wife.
Mhm.
I don't want to come at you and try to fight this battle in a way that beats you down.
That's right.
And neither should you that to me either. So having grace for each other is really important in that. If you're a young married couple or newly married, that's something to where begin to exercise grace.
That's right.
Begin to be angry, but don't sin.
Yes.
Right. If something makes you angry, don't sin in your anger. Deal with it, address it, have grace. Right. And don't expect that you're going to change that, because I'll be honest, in 32 years of course, I'll be honest. I hate it. That's kind of why am I saying that? In 32 years of marriage, you're still a stack it person.
Yep.
And I'm still a file it person.
That's right.
And that's awesome. In fact, now I understand that your stack it personality breeds creativity, breeds just a lightheartedness and there's a positivity and a lightheartedness and a creativity about you that I don't have as a file it person, which if you were me, I would hate that right now. I've learned to love the stack it part of you. And so in these years of just like in the early days, if I had tried to force you into the box that I wanted to put you in, to where you put things where they went, who would you be now? And so the creative energy you have, the life you have, all of those things, I love it. So I'm like, stack on, stack on.
Thank
Don't worry
you,
about
Rob.
the file it. And
Yeah.
so understanding that we have grace initially, but we also learn to embrace that part of our spouse, because it's the best part of who they are. It makes them who they
Right.
are.
And I think too, with that grace, and I'm speaking for myself, when you had grace for me, I felt love and acceptance to my core.
Yeah.
Because you can feel when someone's not accepting the way you are and trying to shape you differently, and so I did appreciate the fact that when we have grace for each other, it actually speaks love and acceptance.
Yes.
And there's areas obviously that you're like, we had to talk through that, maybe, like, hey, are you willing to change on this? Are you willing to have some feedback on some things? But yes, that spoke to me love and acceptance. But stress is another one that actually comes in. Stress in finances, stress in job, stresses will cause that natural disconnection.
Right. Yeah. The hard part about this area of the flaws that we see in each other is that things can be done against each other when we are confronted with those quote unquote flaws or unmet expectations or disappointments, whatever they are, that wound the other person.
That's right.
Wounds that come from the words we say,
right,
from the way we treat our spouse, the frustration, the anger, those types of things. Those emotional outbursts can lead to woundedness. And so I feel like that as we speak to couples, maybe that you've been married a little bit, maybe you've been married longer, and you find yourself in a place of disconnection, that it's important for you to understand that that you've got to go back. You've actually got to put some time and effort into going back and getting to the root of some of the reasons why you're disconnected.
Yes.
And that this area of never having had grace on the flaws of your spouse, and then the wounds that came from that, those need to actually be dealt with. And you can't just hope we're just going to start fresh and we're going to have a fresh start today and we're going to build back better, whatever it is. It's like, no, you've actually got to take some time, put some effort into it, give it some attention, and be intentional with going back and actually getting to the root of those things that maybe started when you were first married.
Right.
To where you saw this as a flaw in your spouse. You allowed that to frustrate you, to be disappointed in that, and you said things that wounded them.
Yeah.
Or you did things that were out of anger. You acted out of anger in ways that wounded them. And so spouses can carry wounds for years.
Yes.
that create a point of a barrier to connection. And so if you're listening to this right now, it's like, take some time with your spouse and begin to work this out. Begin to allow there to be a process of you taking ownership for things that you've done, humbling yourself, repenting of those things, letting them know you're sorry, and asking for forgiveness, and allowing that act of forgiveness to open the door to healing and new levels of connection in your marriage. You may have some things right now going on in your heart and in your mind, as even as you listen to this, they're like, yeah, I know that I said some things that hurt my wife. I know that I've done some things out of anger because I thought she was flawed that I shouldn't have done. If you have those things going on in your heart and mind right now, you need to actually take some time and intentionally go and address that with your wife humbly, and that will allow healing to begin and allow the connection to be remade. And so those things that we look at in our spouse as a flaw lead to disconnection. The wounds that come from those will cause that disconnection will build barriers that will not allow there to be an opportunity to reconnect. So it's super important that we address those. And then, there's also this point where we can have a fear of moving forward with somebody because of the way they've treated us in the past.
Kind of keeps you frozen in fear
Yeah.
because you don't want to, you don't trust, so you don't want to like you become guarded in
Yeah.
your heart, and you because really the connection piece, you want to be seen and known by the other person, accepted and loved.
Yeah.
And so with that, then you become neutralized, and you're
Yeah.
neutral in your marriage, and it is not a place that is life-giving. It's just frozen with fear.
Yeah.
And
It's so hard.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. Being a man who has a wife who trusts him is critical for connection. To be a trustworthy man is absolutely critical. And we discussed, it's interesting because we discussed that in episode 16. We talked about becoming a trustworthy man. And part of the heart behind that was to encourage men to be a man that their wife can rely on.
That's good.
To be a reliable man, to be a man that your wife can trust.
Right.
Because when a woman feels like she can trust you, she'll overlook a lot of the, she'll overlook your dirty socks and your BO and the different things that maybe used to bother her. But if she trusts you, there's a sense of we can get through this.
Yeah.
We can build together.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And so I love what you're saying there. This element of getting to the root allows there to be a point where it's like, oh my goodness, I see my husband humbling himself.
That's right.
Apologizing, asking for forgiveness, wanting to reconcile these things.
Yeah.
That builds trust, which then naturally creates connection.
That's right. That humility is really key.
Yeah.
That humble place. And like you had said before, repentance. And I wanted to add as well is that, when you're going after some of the roots, the deep places, sometimes it's a matter of, I'm reminded of, in the Gospels, the wise man and the foolish man. The wise man built his house upon the rock. And when the rains and the winds came, his house stood firm. And the foolish man who built on the sand, it was destroyed, wiped away. And so sometimes we're like, man, we started off when we were building our marriage upon the rock, which is Jesus. He's at the center and the structure's going up. But sometimes we develop things where it's like rotting wood in the structure because we've allowed some things, some offenses, like you mentioned, some things into the structure that actually has weakened the structure. And we need to go back and go, you know what? We know that Jesus is the center and he's what we have been building on. We just need to repair a few things. We need to get that structure built stronger so that it will withstand the storms that hit our lives. Because everyone walks through storms.
Right.
And so if that's you today, even like I just speak to that, it's time to evaluate the structure in your marriage and go, is there some deep things and some things that we need to repair in our hearts, repair in the marriage, and really go after building the strong structure because there's hope in that, because nothing is beyond, if Jesus is the foundation, that nothing is beyond repair if two people are willing to say, I'm in it. I'm in this covenant with you. I want the best foundation, which is Jesus, and to build a stronger and fortify that structure.
Yeah.
And everyone needs to do it. We had to do it.
Yeah.
Definitely. We had to go in and let's go over some areas. And so I think it's so good to take the time to reflect on that structure and those things that are in our heart.
It's really true. And I think that there's I know there's guys out there who have lost the heart to fight, to go in and rebuild, and the work it takes and the effort it takes. And to be frank, I think that there's a lot of guys out there who really don't even want to connect with their wives. They don't want to reconnect. They've lost heart in their marriage. They don't find their wife physically attractive. They don't like their wife's personality. They've begun to really almost there's there's a verse in the Bible that talks about the dynamic of King David's relationship with his wife, Michal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a verse that talks about when he was dancing in the streets as they were bringing the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget where they were at, which city they were at, but he was dancing in the streets and just abandoned any kind of dignity, just let it all loose, and was dancing in the street. And she was watching him through a window, it says, and it says that she despised him in her heart.
Wow.
And I feel like that as married couples that we can get to that point where
Mm-hmm.
we actually despise our spouse in our
Mhm.
heart. We would never say that, but we feel that. We don't like the way they look. We don't like the way they handle themselves. We don't like the way that their personality, they've hurt us. They're just offensive to us. And that type of a heart posture, it will not allow you to reconnect with your wife.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're feeling like, man, I just have zero desire to reconnect with her,
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just kind of blow up the house and just call it good. Or I know I can't do that because I've got kids and I've got legacy and I've got a reputation. So I'm just going to stick with the marriage, but I'm going to just choose to be miserable in my marriage, which we've seen that too. It's crazy.
Yes.
Rather than trying to actually work towards having an abundant life in your marriage, you would settle for being miserable and just living together just so you don't have to get a divorce. And so I want to encourage guys out there to begin to, you have to work your way through that to really want your wife again, to really make a decision to say, I'm going to begin to pursue her again because I have lost heart. There's nothing in my emotional state right now that wants her, but the understanding that you made a covenant with her and that God is watching you and he's with you and that he wants you to begin to fight for that which he gave you. He gave you your wife to steward. He gave your wife to provide for, to protect, and to help be the head in your home. And you don't just respond to how you feel in the moment. You respond to the assignment that God gave you in this. And in that place, though, there's got to be a point where you get past how you feel and you begin to say, okay, I've got to change my direction and my feelings got to follow.
Absolutely. And I think it's key in there to go, God, I need a transformation of my heart. My heart is hardened.
Yes.
And take my heart of stone
Yes.
and turn it into a heart of flesh.
Yep.
And I need to partner with you, God, because in this moment, I'm not seeing anything good.
Yeah.
And in this moment, my sight, the way I view my spouse is not a way that is, it's viewed from a very skewed, hurt, hatred. I mean, all of those feelings. And the Lord is going to ask you then, are you willing to release judgment and forgive and allow me to take that heart of stone and turn it into a heart of flesh to where you could feel again, to where you can actually believe again, where you can have hope again. But it's a partnership with God that will actually help lead you to that.
Yes.
And I also just feel that in our own experiences with people in counseling and things we've done with marriages is that I have seen couples in adultery and some of the very difficult marriage situations. And I have seen God come in and do a miracle. And I've seen God take a heart of a man who was betrayed by a wife, and he was like, see ya. But yet God intervened and gave him a supernatural love. Like, you can't explain this kind of love.
Right.
This is a God love that the Lord came in and supernaturally gave him that love for his wife. They got healed, counseling, restoration, and they are together to this day, and legacy is impacted.
This is like 12, 13 years later.
Well, yes. And legacy is impacted because of the miracle
Yeah.
God did in the
Yeah.
transforming of a man's
Yeah.
heart to actually be able to love his wife.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that, 12 years later, this woman told me is that she had to, in the midst of our pain, she had to look ahead and say, I have to look at the legacy that's before me
Mhm.
because the pain right now is so great. So this is what I just feel so strongly
Yeah.
in my spirit is that there are times when we have to get our eyes off of the pain and
Mhm.
what we're walking through because it actually clouds us. And the Lord says, lift up your head, look to me, and look ahead to the legacy that you
Yeah.
will have.
Yeah.
And that gives you then, like, okay, eyes off of
Yeah.
the now
Yeah.
and the pain and the trauma
Yeah.
to the greater,
Right.
the great I am
Yeah.
and the greater.
Yeah. He's the source of the healing, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Our, Jehovah Rapha, God, our healer, he can heal your heart.
Yes.
He can heal your marriage.
Yes.
And in that place of healing, we will find new levels of connection that drive us together and forward to where we actually have a future and a hope together. That couple you're referring to, we saw them recently with their adult children and their grandchildren, and it was
Mm-hmm.
remarkable to see them and just to see the fruit of some very difficult decisions,
Mm-hmm.
some very hard hard um you know parts of the journey, which
Right.
that's even, you can't even, words can't even do it justice. But the decisions they made, though, to fight for their marriage,
Mm-hmm.
even when they didn't feel like it, even when they didn't want to,
Yep.
you see it now and it's like
Right.
remarkable. And so we say that to encourage you guys out there, because it's like this is the point that it has to start at. If you are in a place where you're disconnected with your wife, you have to come to a place where you say, you know what, God, I need a miracle, but I
Mhm.
know that miracle starts with me choosing to love my wife even
That's
when I
right.
don't feel like it, and to choose to do some things, take some practical steps that can help me connect with my wife,
Mm-hmm.
heal this relationship, and move forward together to the legacy that you have for us. And so that's where the starting point. And we've alluded to, like, the first thing that a guy can do
Mm-hmm.
before this, when we talked about getting to the root. There's
Mm-hmm.
got to be some time and intention placed on getting to the root, looking
Mm-hmm.
at those areas where you looked at your spouse's flaws and there was wounds there, and allowing there to be the process of repentance
Mm-hmm.
and forgiveness and restoration that leads to healing and growth, right? And so it's going to start with you practically trying to get to the root of the disconnection. What is
Mm-hmm.
at the root here? And
That's
it
right.
could be wounds of the past. It could be the fact that you've not really ever tried to truly understand them for who they are, and you've never really grown in your appreciation for who they are and how they
Mm-hmm.
are. It could be a number of different things, but you getting to the root of it. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it takes us actually getting out of the house, getting out of the insulated area that we're in, and allowing there to be some light shown into our marriage from someone else. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say, look at getting some counseling.
Mm-hmm.
The investment you make into
Mm-hmm.
counseling will be well worth it. It could very well
Mm-hmm.
save your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Begin to pursue this discovery of where are we at and how did we get here?
Mm-hmm.
And really beginning to talk about that, if you can, with your spouse. If you can't talk to your spouse about those things, then talk with a counselor about it, talk with a good friend, and
Mm-hmm.
begin to look at that and say, how can I then um, begin to create new patterns, though, of connection in my marriage?
Mm-hmm.
How can my wife and I begin to build patterns of connection
Mm-hmm.
that are new, that are different than the way that we've done it in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the second thing. The first thing would be to get to the root
Mm-hmm.
and then begin to build new patterns of connection. And so what are some things that a person can do some ideas that you might have for a man to begin to pursue new patterns of connection with his wife?
I would say taking interest in the things that she values and taking note of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like, oh, what is her favorite coffee drink? Oh, maybe I should bring that sometime.
Yeah.
Or
Hmm.
yeah, I think that making sure you actually form some activities that actually you can enjoy. I know for us, like for example, I started working out with you just a couple days a week, and so that's actually a really fun connection.
Right.
And it was a new pattern for us because I hadn't done that before, and I totally love it. We wake up early and we have the drive to the gym, and there's conversation, there's instant connection there, and then working out together. So that actually has been really a new pattern for us.
Yeah.
So finding those new patterns.
It's been a little humbling for me when you lift more weight than I do, and
no, you're the
get more
tough
weight
one.
off the bar. It's kind of embarrassing for me, but I've no, I'm
Yeah,
just kidding.
you well, you're very much more fit and got the workout going.
Yeah.
So you've been doing it for a while. And I'm thankful for that. So yeah, new patterns of cooking together. It's just trying to find some things that you have common ground
Yeah.
in and that you can actually do together. Being intentional to do something together. I know, like when we had kids, and I'm just speaking to then more of like someone who has kids.
Yeah.
We decided as a family we would do a family night. So we carved out and we're very intentional to do like Friday night is family night. So that is the night we have fun food, we connect, and in that connection with family is our connecting too. It's time spent. And so that was really something that was developed a pattern in our marriage and in our family life that was vital because our kids want to see the marriage of a husband and wife. They want to see their mom and dad connecting, kissing, like life in that marriage.
Yeah.
It models it for them.
Yeah.
And so it's very important for them to see that.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is just in having adult children now, that's one of the things that they said that they loved so much is that we had a family night. They just loved the fact that that connection time happened. And so the fruit now though, because sometimes you do these things and you're pouring into your marriage, you're pouring into your family and your children, and you don't necessarily see the fruit, but you're sowing good seed, the fruit will come.
Right.
And now we see the fruit.
Yeah.
We're so thankful we did.
Yeah.
We're so thankful.
And looking at like how a couple can begin to create new patterns of connection, it's one of those things where it has to take place in the regular day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And so really trying to figure out ways that you can enhance just those interactions that you would have on the day-to-day to where your wife knows that you're making an effort to connect with her.
Yes.
It's like, and it can be little simple things that you wouldn't normally think of. But again, we go back, there's 3 elements that are involved in every one of these points we're going to make. And that is, it takes time, it takes attention, and it takes intention.
Yes.
And so you have to intentionally think about, how can I create connections with my wife? And then you have to take the time to do it. And you have to actually plan it out to where there's some attention given to it, right? So time, attention, and intention. And when it looks like, maybe there's a way for you to leave a note for your wife, get a dry erase marker and leave a note on the mirror for her, telling her, who's that beautiful lady that, in the mirror. Maybe it's leaving a note for her somewhere on a piece of paper, with her her purse, to where when next time she gets her keys out, she finds a note. These are little interactions throughout the course of the day. The text message, when you get a break and you're like, oh, you think about your wife, and instead of just kind of going about your day, just send her a quick text telling her how beautiful she is. There's ways for us to develop patterns of connection that are simple, quick, and that really help our wives know that we're thinking about them, that we love them, that we're connecting with them. It's not, you don't have to do it because you feel like it, because again, these are patterns that you're beginning to create to where you're doing the right thing, and then the feelings will follow. I guarantee you that the feelings will follow. that as you see your marriage healed up and begin to walk in this place of new levels of connection, that the feelings will follow on your part, and then they will follow on your wife's part. And so walking in that place where it's like, how can I interact? Do meal times together. Grab, if you've lost sight of that, do meal times together. A lot of times when speaking of families, couples that are in that family stage where they've got kids at home, so much of our effort and our time is spent towards raising our kids that we lose sight of each other oftentimes.
That's right. That's right.
And so really, like for me, one of the things that I remember practicing as best I could was making sure that when I got home and walked into the house, that you were the first person that I kissed, that I said hi to.
Yes.
The kids were there always, usually to see me before you were, because you were doing your thing. And the kids would come to the door, and I'd obviously, say hi to them, but I would go to you first.
Yeah.
And to be like, give you a kiss. And then the kids see that, they know who my priority is.
Yeah.
And making sure that my wife was the priority always. Because ultimately the marriage is going to last longer than the kids in the house. And so being sure that my heart was one that said, yeah, I've got to build my marriage first and then my children second. That was part of that family dynamic that was really important in that time. And so developing daily interactions with your spouse to where it's like, okay, I need to just do, not, at first, if you have to set an alarm, do it. Not that we want to become robotic in this, but if you have to be reminded to where it's like, just set an alarm and then, check in on the wife, send her a message, give her a voice, stop by the store and get her something on the way home, whatever it is, but begin to establish these new patterns of connection in your marriage, and your wife will see that.
That's right. I mean, we do. We will see it.
Yes.
And there's an element to that as well as that you did well, is the pillar in your life was gratitude. And so you were always using your words to say, thank you. Thank you for this meal. Thank you. And that's a connection.
Yeah.
A woman's heart feels valued because she just made a meal, or, thank you that you did a load of laundry. Thank you. I mean, you did it in all of the little things and in the big things. And so that was the culture. We had a culture in our home and in our marriage of gratitude.
Yeah.
And that actually kept us connected.
Yeah.
And so that's really vital, and what we're talking about here too is these are things that you can develop as habits.
Yeah.
So, but it just takes intentionality, like you said, and putting into practice these things. It's like stretching a muscle for the first time, but you do it enough and it becomes a habit, but you actually change a culture in your home. And so these things will produce some great things in your home.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of like saying thank you, I remember at first kind of being like, I feel like I'm saying I love you a lot more than, it's like, we just had a conversation earlier today on the phone, and I told her I loved her. And now it's like she's telling me she loves me again and wants me to tell her, not that you asked me to, but it was love you. I felt like I was saying I love you a lot more than I felt like was like what I would have normally said I love you. And so through the years, though, I realized that if I was going to try and fight that, or was going to try and just, maybe ration out the I love yous, that would have not served us well in the long run. And not that you're trying to just say I love you out of just just out of kind of a robotic approach. Again, speaking of, being a robot in this, it becomes a pattern of verbal affirmation of your love.
That's right.
That is actually very foundational in your relationship. It's a constant reiteration of I love you.
Yeah.
I love you. And now there are points and times where you can tell your wife I love you, and then immediately, think something or do something to where it's like that's not showing her love. But the fact is that verbal engagement of saying I love you is meant to reinforce the fact that I love you. And what does that truly mean? You know, Ephesians chapter 5:25 says that husbands, we are to love our wives.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now, how are we to love our wives? It goes on to say that we are to love our wives like Christ loves the church. He laid his life down for her. And there's this sacrifice, there's this laying down of ourselves, there's this reminder that we are to love our wives and lay our lives down for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's another part of it too, where it's like, if you haven't told your wife you loved her on a regular basis, begin to do that.
Right.
Begin to, again, it's not based on how you feel in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's based upon a commitment to living my life sacrificially for you, laying my life down for you. And so I'm going to tell you that I love you, because that reminds me of this commitment I made. And so if you haven't been doing that, start telling her you love her. There's also this element to where another pattern that you could begin to develop would be to begin to actually have conversations where you talk about the future together.
That's right.
To where you begin to dream together.
Mm-hmm.
When we are in a place where we are healthy and where where love is flowing just naturally, people dream together. You dream about the future, you plan, you talk about things. And so oftentimes if we begin to stir that up in our relationship to where it's like you're in a place where you've kind of gotten to the root of some things, and you've kind of worked your way through some of those wounds, the healing process, you've gotten through that, and now you're creating these new habit patterns. Begin to dream together. Begin to talk about, what's next. Begin to talk about this next season that's coming up, and begin to dream together. I feel like that's another really healthy thing that a couple could do.
Absolutely, because that stirs connection. It actually, it's goals, it's dreams, it's things that are ahead of you to look forward to. And so I think those are, very important. I know for us, it's like now that we have grandkids in Florida, it's like, okay, how often can we see them? And, what are some goals there of, being with our family and gathering? Are we going to do it for Christmas? Are we going to try to gather for Thanksgiving? You know, just and looking at what the future has, like dreaming for the future of some things. So yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah. I love that. And there's something about fresh starts that are really helpful as you go through the seasons and the different, all the years that you go through in marriage. And if you've gotten disconnected and you find yourself needing to reconnect, then one of the things that I would encourage guys to do would be to begin to look at your wife through a different lens. Sometimes we need to take our glasses off, clean the lenses, and then put them back on, or we need an adjustment, to where we need a new prescription. We need new lenses. And sometimes, I feel like that there's guys who are so negative in the way they look at their wives, and that all they can do is see the things in their wife's life that bother them. And they completely overlook things that people all around them can say, wow, your wife really does a great job of decorating your home. Wow, your wife really does a good job of keeping connected with the kids. Your wife does these things, but you don't look and see those things because all you do is look at her through a lens of negativity. And so one of the things that can be helpful in re-establishing connection with your wife is to really look at how you're seeing her and change the lens of how you're looking at her, to actually really rediscover who she is, to really begin to look at her in a way to where it's like you begin to appreciate all of the positive qualities about her, and you begin to lay down that negative thinking. And so to me, that's a big part of this, because guys, when we see the tremendous value in our wives and how amazing they are, and you begin to look at them through that lens, the appreciation automatically breathes
Mhm.
life into that relationship.
Right.
And so what can a guy do then to begin to rediscover his wife? What are some of the things that as men that they could do to um, change that lens out and look at their wife differently?
I think you spoke about it in, husbands lay down your life for your wives.
Mm-hmm.
And so laying down your life, laying down your own desires, like serving,
Mm.
honoring, all these things
Honor. Ooh.
all these things we've talked
Yeah.
about but these are the things that you can help in rediscovering love again. Because it's a lifetime I can't even remember the quote. It was talking about how it's like you get married, but you actually have to continually fall in love, like keep your love on.
Yeah.
Like Danny Silk would say, keep
Yeah.
your love on.
Right.
And so the ways that you keep your love on for, your spouse, is, is important.
Yeah. Yeah, that there's an element of keeping it fresh, keep your love on, where to fight for connection means that I have to consistently evaluate how I am viewing my spouse. I
Mm-hmm.
and so if I find myself consistently negative,
Right.
then you know, there's this element to where it's like Paul talks about in scripture where he talks about no matter what the conditions are around you,
Mm-hmm.
you give thanks in all things.
That's right.
You don't give thanks for all things, but you give
Mm-hmm.
thanks in all things. And I feel like that we can get soured and just really become bitter and in our thinking about our spouse. And it's like, when was the last time you gave thanks for your wife?
Right. I think that's key.
When was the last time that you were grateful for just who she is? Just not even how she acts or what she does or any of that, but just for who she is. And that you
Mm-hmm.
became thankful in your heart and you begin to express gratitude for her. And it starts in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
It starts in a place where in your mind you begin to say, in your heart you begin to give thanks, and that translates to your mind, which translates to your words.
That's
And
right.
so you
It's
begin to
good.
you begin to say, thank you, God, for my wife.
That's right.
Begin to give thanks for her. It doesn't matter how you feel about her in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, but gratitude is something that kind of helps bring those tracks back together and allows that connection
Mm-hmm.
to happen to where you're both on
Mm-hmm.
the same track again.
That's
And
right.
and so being grateful, I feel like, is a huge part of rediscovering your wife, because what you do is you begin to actually notice things. You actually begin to pay attention to like, oh, you know what, she really is a great communicator,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really grateful for that. I feel like that with you, I I have grown in my appreciation of like how you are such a great leader when it comes to you're like a field general, right?
Mm-hmm.
As much as you're not an administrator in the back
Mm-hmm.
office,
Mm-hmm.
filing and
Right.
and doing the organizational things,
I've got the piles.
you get a team of people like here on the property where we live. You get a team of people doing the practical day in and day out stuff, and you know exactly how to lead. You got people fired up, you've got them lined up, and things hum
Mm-hmm.
really, really well under your leadership when it comes to the productivity, when it comes to getting things done. And so that's something to where it's like, man, I've learned to appreciate that about you that I wouldn't have appreciated about you before, because I wasn't looking for it. The way you stay in connection with our adult children, and you're kind of always the one who's aware and in the know of what's going
Mm-hmm.
on, to where it's like, oh, we need to be praying for this, or this is
Mm-hmm.
going on. And it's because you stay connected so well with our
Mm-hmm.
kids. I'm thankful for that. And so then you begin to rediscover your spouse, and that creates new levels of connection between you, because you're paying attention, you're giving thanks, you're learning to grow in your appreciation, you're beginning to change the lens from a negative lens to a place of gratitude, which turns into a positive lens. And then when you begin to actually really appreciate your wife, it shifts the way that you approach her, the way you speak to her, all of those things begin to shift when the heart goes from being being negative towards her to actually being grateful for her and positive for her.
Absolutely, because a woman is the barometer of the house, of the marriage.
Yeah.
So, they're sensing all of that. So if there's tension, if there's they can sense that.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what's wrong with me? Usually, they'll go through like, oh, it's me. Have I done something? Like, is everything okay? Usually a wife will tell that to a husband. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
Are we good? Like, because then you start feeling this, like there's like, my husband's not happy. He seems frustrated, disconnected. So the woman is sensing all of that.
Yeah.
And so it's very important that, as a man, you realize, ask her, like, what do you feel with our marriage? She'll tell you.
Yeah.
Because she's sensing it all.
Yeah.
And
that actually, I'll chime in there. That takes some effort for a guy to want feedback like that. Because he has to be willing to hear what she has to say.
Right.
And then he has to be willing to swallow his pride and understand if she says something like, well, this is what I see and it makes me feel like this.
Right.
It's good when we're giving feedback to each other, it's good for us not to point the finger and blame each other.
Right.
But it's good for us to express how it makes us feel. And if you've made your wife feel less than, or like she's not valuable, or that you've kind of really treated her negatively and she expresses that, then you've got to be willing to say, you know what, I hear what you have to say and I'm really sorry for that.
Right. Yes, that posture of humility.
Yes.
And it's being willing, and that is hard probably for both parties.
Yeah.
To actually receive.
It's not just a guy thing.
And Danny Silk, this is the thing. We've been married 32 years. We have more to learn. That you never stop learning.
Yeah, that's right.
So one of the things that Danny Silk, he came into town and he was just talking about how really asking for feedback and then saying, are you willing to receive feedback? So then I was like, oh yeah, we got to remember that. And so then you did a couple weeks later, we were having a discussion and you said, are you willing to receive some feedback? And I was like, absolutely. My defenses were down. And you said it, and I was like,
did you have to put your defenses down?
No.
Okay.
The question put my defenses down.
Good.
It's just crazy because I was like, you were asking permission.
Right.
Not just saying, well, I don't think that's, you know what I mean?
Well, and I didn't blame you for anything either.
I didn't get blamed, but you just said, well, what do you think about? And I was such a healthy, like, I'm like, woo, victory. And so
finally he figured it out.
No, but it was that willing, like, I've got to be willing to receive it.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear it. It's our flesh that doesn't want to hear it. Our pride.
Oh my goodness.
We want to be right and get off the right hill. That's like staking your claim. I'm right. And I won't move from this position, because that will be the great divide of connection for sure.
I remember like years of me trying to figure out how to address certain things. And I would try to address it and you would end up just getting hurt. And then it was like, it was literally like, that wasn't the outcome that I wanted.
Right.
But I didn't know. I'm like, I don't know how to approach this without hurting her. So I'm just not going to say anything. And it really, that type of thinking, you would, and you would intuitively think that by me not saying anything, protects my wife, but it really doesn't. But saying it the wrong way hurts your wife. And so there's this element to where maybe we should do another episode on conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we don't want to hurt our wives by approaching it the wrong way, but we don't want to pull back and say nothing, because that does not help at all. And so how does a guy approach his wife in a way to where he can actually address things, give feedback without it hurting her? And I feel like that what I've learned about feedback and about that is that I've had to become more emotionally intelligent about what I was feeling. Because if I'm able to express to you, this is what happened and this is how it made me feel, then you're like, you connect with that so well,
okay,
and you're not Yeah, but you're not hurt. You're not. It's amazing to me the difference, and it's also amazing to me that I couldn't figure that out for all those years when it was like the conversations would end up just kind of not intending to be hurtful, but they would end up being hurtful, and it's just like this is terrible. I don't want to address these things because I don't
Mm-hmm.
do it well, and then my wife always comes back and she's like, this is me reflecting. It was like you
Mm-hmm.
would come back and be like, why didn't you come to me and approach it like this?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, because I don't think that way naturally. And so
And then I'm like,
you were
I'm not part of your construction team.
right.
I'm not one of your employees.
Yes. Yeah. Literally, I would approach, I think, oh, I'm doing a great job because I'm approaching this like I would approach an employee.
Right.
And I'd be, and direct, and it just didn't work that way.
Right.
But then when you came back and were like, why don't you do it this way? You weren't giving me feedback that was a good way of giving me feedback.
Right.
And so my hackles would go up and I'd put the defenses up and be like, oh yeah, we don't want to go here. And it would end up with a fight and hurt and
Right.
and just totally be like, I don't know. It
Well,
completely did not build connection. I'll tell you that right now.
what's great though is I know there's men listening is that you worked on trying to get connected to your like emotional awareness.
Yeah.
Because I would ask you like, what are you thinking? What are you
Mhm.
feeling? Because I would allow you space
Mm-hmm.
to process, because I could tell you were like, this isn't like, we're not making any ground
Right.
here.
Yeah.
And so you would retreat as
You
far
didn't
as
want
like,
to. You didn't want to butt heads with the old bull for too long because
no, and
in my stubbornness, that would have just kind of continued to push me back and
Right.
caused me to wall off even more.
I knew you well enough to be like, he just needs some time and space, and maybe you'd go and hit the yard work. Like, I'm just going to go do yard work, or I'm going to go to the shop.
Yeah.
Just to.
Yeah.
And so, but what I can say that in the beginning, it was just foreign to you to try to connect with like,
Totally.
I don't even know why I'm thinking this or why I'm
Yeah.
feeling this. I'm trying to like, and I'd ask you questions like the counselor, like, what about this? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
But you put in the work to try.
Yes.
And then with that came, oh, I'm getting to know
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
And so, as a man, put in the effort.
Yeah.
And John is an example.
Keep trying. Don't give
Yep.
up.
And John is the example of more emotional awareness
Yeah.
than he had
Yeah.
when we were first married,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, and if there's wives listening to this as well, be patient with your husband.
That's right.
Be patient. Extend grace. We've got to have grace for each other, because what happens is you see breakthrough in one of these areas,
Mm-hmm.
and it's amazing the jump you take. You level
Yeah.
up so
Yeah.
well, and then it's like all of the pressure, all of the conflict, all of the negative just junk that was developed that came out of those types of interactions. Once you learn how to do it better, it's
Mhm.
like amazing the result of that
That's
in your
right.
marriage. The connection, when you actually find a way to connect well,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
It's worth it. Like,
it's
oh my
totally
gosh.
worth it. And so be patient, wives, and
Mhm.
husbands, keep trying, don't give up. And really learning this is something to where you could read about it all day. You could read, you could have a formula put in place, but none of that is going to be a substitute for you
Mhm.
getting in there and just working on this as a
Mhm.
couple and fighting for connection, fighting
right.
for how do I learn to be emotionally available for my wife
Yep.
and for my husband. And so as men, learning to be emotionally available is really the next thing that we would talk about, is like
Mhm.
beginning to, instead of asking your wife when you get home from work, how was your day? Begin to ask her, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
What
It's good.
what's has it what's been difficult for you today, or what's made you happy today?
Right.
Begin to ask her questions at an emotional level
Yeah.
that
Yes.
allow her to engage and talk, and then she feels like you're connecting with her at an emotional level, which is so important. And then begin to ask your wife for feedback.
Mhm.
Begin to ask her, hey, um, how can I make you feel more loved?
Mm-hmm.
How can I?
What are the things that speak love to you?
Yeah.
Because there's different, it varies for the women of what really speaks love. You could be thinking you're hitting the mark and you're not.
Who do we talk to recently that was telling us about that?
Actually, we have some friends who he would leave out of town and he'd come back and bring her flowers and gifts. And he's like, I am winning as a husband. I am showering my wife with these things and showing her how much I care and appreciate her.
Right.
Well, what comes out in counseling is that she's like, that speaks nothing to me. I have a to-do list. And that would speak a lot more love if you kind of checked a few things off the to-do list, because her love language was acts of service. And so it is asking those, like discovering each other. That love. What's your love language? What are the things that speak love to you?
And so as you ask those questions, get that feedback, then you begin to make yourself available emotionally for your wife. And that means the conversations you have, allow them to go into places that you may not have allowed them to go before. Allow yourself to express thoughts of emotions and words of emotions when your wife talks to you, instead of just clamming up and just giving her kind of the, I don't know, or that's not important. Begin to talk with her about how you're feeling. What are the things that you're fearful about? What are the things that you're excited about? What are the things that are stressing you out right now? And there's this element, man, especially when it came to being a business owner and being a husband. And it was like, I always kind of had this sense of like, I don't want to burden my wife with what's going on at work. I don't want to talk about work when I get home. And I had to come to a point where it was like, well, that creates automatic disconnection, because business was such an important part of my life. If I'm not willing to talk to my wife about the business and how the business is going and what are the challenges, then there's no connection.
It's you're not sharing a very big portion of your life with me.
Absolutely. And so, so this thought of, oh, I'm protecting my wife from the ins and outs of the business, you're actually not protecting her. You're actually not allowing her to connect with you by doing that.
That's right.
Now, the wife may be like, well, I don't want to know that your last P&L looked really bad. You know, that whatever it is, that your gross profit margin's down and you're frustrated with that and you're trying to make, it depends on the wife. Some wives may be all into that, and other wives may be like, I really don't care about that, but how does that make you feel?
Right. And I always liked knowing, because then I could gauge you, like, oh, he feels like he has the stress right now, but I know why, because he shared it with me.
Totally.
So I appreciated that.
Yeah.
Knowing.
Yeah. So those are some areas where a man can begin to develop and fight for connection in his marriage, understanding that this is going to be a fight. It's going to require time. It's going to require attention. It's going to require intention in everything you do. You're going to have to be very intentional in this. You're going to have to pay attention to what's going on and plan things out and figure out how you're going to move forward. And it's going to take time. So time, attention, and intention are part of every aspect that we've talked about today.
That's right.
Go ahead.
And I think too that I just really feel that there are some that may be like, hey, I'm actually divorced and I tried to do it. I tried to build something. And so I just speak to that. If you're a man who tried that, use what we're talking about today, because God's going to have you build something new.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like I was
that's good.
Gonna just share to those that
we're talking to guys who've been through divorce and who are like, I want to learn everything I can. So that moving into this next relationship, if that were to happen, that I would be able to be a better husband and make better connections and avoid the pitfalls that we found in my first marriage. So absolutely. We speak hope and life. And so learning that, learning how to get to the roots of things as quickly as possible. Don't let it just, don't wait to get to the root. Don't wait to repent and ask for forgiveness. Don't wait to deal with the hard things. If you're young and new, deal with it quickly. If you're looking at, man, we've been dealing with this for a long time, It's time for you to take some time with your wife and get to the roots and go through. And like we said before, you may need counseling. You may need to walk through this with someone else, but take the time to get to the roots of these things. And then begin to establish new patterns of emotional connection on those daily interactions and the times when you are just kind of in passing, where your words and your actions point to the fact that you love your wife and that you want to connect with her, right? And so those daily interactions, begin to establish new patterns in that. Send her a text, those types of practical things that you can do on a daily basis to interact with her differently than you have in the past, that will help revitalize the connection between the two of you. And then we've got rediscovering your spouse. Learn to change the lens out. Get rid of the negative, nasty lenses that you've been looking at your wife through, and put on a new lens and begin to give thanks for her. Begin to be grateful for her. Begin to understand what a gift she is from God. Begin to understand that you have not stewarded that relationship well, and it's time for you to begin to steward it in a new way. Look at your wife differently. Begin to appreciate the great things about your wife. And as you do that, you're going to find that everything else is going to follow that. And so rediscovering your wife. And then lastly, it's really important that we begin to develop new ways of being available for our wife emotionally.
Yes.
In our conversations, in those walks that you take, in the meal times, when you're getting ready for bed, those times when it's like, begin to become emotionally available for your wife.
Yes.
And those areas, those 4 areas will really help you reconnect with your wife at a place where there can be new life in your marriage. There can be a new sense of just appreciation for each other. And the thing that's important to consider in this is that you're not doing this based upon your wife's response.
That's good.
You're not only responding when she responds well to this.
That's right.
You're doing this as a steward of your marriage. You're doing this and saying, I'm going to make the right decisions here.
Yes.
And I'm going to begin to humble myself and put into practice these things so that I can save my marriage.
Yep.
You are the man of the house. You are the head of the home. Biblically speaking, God gave you that role as a steward in your marriage to protect your wife, to provide for her, and to lead yourself well in that. And so as you lead yourself well, you and your wife can begin to lead your home well. And all of this requires you to act and be obedient to the things God's called you to do, even when your wife doesn't do that herself.
Yes.
Even if she's not ready yet to respond to you emotionally, even if she's not really at a place to where she's ready to reconnect with you, you begin to step out into these things and understanding that it may take time, but ultimately you're working to win your wife's heart back. She is a beauty that needs to be rescued. And she has lost sight of the fact that she's beautiful and that you have any interest at all in rescuing her. And it's time for you to begin to step up and begin to take action in such a way to where she understands that she's beautiful and that you're going to lay your life down to rescue her and to be the man that she wants to be with. And it's a hard thing to do. But depending on where you're at in your relationship with your wife, understand that connection is challenging and it always needs to be worked for and it needs to be fought for. But if you do that, you're going to have a marriage that will go the distance. And that's what we want to see. We want to see families revitalized. We want to see legacies that go from generation to generation to generation.
That's right.
To where it's like, oh, I remember what my parents did and they had to fight hard for their marriage, but they did it. And I'm so glad they did, because now I have a pattern to live my life through with, to be able to build my marriage on.
That's right.
And then my grandchildren and my great grandchildren. And
Come
so
on.
understanding that this is way more than about how you feel right now in the moment.
Yep.
And so to build those connections.
So good.
So it's so good to have you speak into this topic with the men, Brenda. I'm so glad to have you here. I love you very much.
I love you.
Super grateful for the fact that you've just been such an amazing partner to allow me to to figure this stuff out through the years. And I'm
Yes.
still learning and still growing. But I tell you one thing, I will always fight for connection. I will
Yeah.
always fight for that place of putting you first, laying my life down for you, and connecting with you at a very intimate way in all 6 areas that we talked about in episode 12. And it's so fun to have you on the podcast.
Oh,
So thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. And thank you for leading me and us well, and for fighting for connection.
Yeah.
Because after 32 years, we see the fruit
Yeah.
of everything that we've sown, the ups, the downs. Everyone has them in marriage.
Yep.
But we've seen the faithfulness of God.
Yep.
And we've seen our lives built on Him. And we've withstood the storms of life because of Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
So I love you.
Yeah. Thank you. Will you do me a favor? We don't pray often on the podcast, but would you pray for the men who are listening, and maybe if there's wives listening as well, but pray for those connections and those marriages.
Absolutely.
As we wrap things up. Okay.
Jesus, I just thank you because marriage is your plan and your design. And I pray right now for there to be a supernatural strength, love, a supernatural desire for connection. God, that you would take the places of our heart, and the Holy Spirit would lead us to those deep places that you want to heal, that you want us to actually let go of some things of expectation, disappointment, and that you want us to forgive. And that, God, I just pray for marriages right now that are hurting, that you would be the great comforter, that you would walk with them through the journey of marriage. And Lord, that you would bind a marriage in such strong unity that they can weather the storms, that they can weather the things that life brings, because they're planted and they have the foundation of Jesus. So God, I just pray, anchor marriages. And I just pray for healing over marriages. And I just declare that marriages will be strengthened and abundant. They will have that life-giving marriage, and that you would restore hope to those that are hopeless. I thank you, God. I just speak a blessing over marriages. And I just am reminded, like, get your eyes off of maybe the pain and get your eyes on Jesus, the great I am, and the greater of the legacy that's ahead of you.
That's right.
Jesus is with you, and He's for you.
Amen.
And we bless you in Jesus' name.
Wow. Powerful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, thank you for listening and being a part of the On Assignment journey with us. If you would like to receive even more input and value into your life as you pursue life and leadership, and you're a man who wants to grow, I would encourage you to go to our website at mobilizedman.com and sign up for our weekly Waypoints dispatch, which is weekly guidance for life and leadership. It's just it's tremendously valuable in that it just brings a very simple principle weekly to your inbox that will help you grow as a man, as a leader, and as a man of faith. And so our heart's desire at Mobilized Man is to really help train and mobilize men as kingdom assets, men who are strong and capable, men of faith who are able to lead well and to have an impact on the world as they fulfill the purposes and plans of God in their lives. And so Waypoints is just another tool that we have to get more truth and good solid principles out there to men. And so sign up for Waypoints on our website. And then if you've got if God's doing something in your life through what you've been hearing, then man, we'd love to hear from you. So drop a comment on one of the podcast platforms, or if you're on YouTube, drop a comment there, leave a like. And we'd love to connect with you, hear your story, and then give you a shout out on the podcast. But again, Brenda, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening in as we talked about fighting for connection today.
Yes.
And until next week, stay on the path.